What I'm talking about is value added, and kind of paraphrasing John Fitzgerald Kennedy, ask not what your not only what your assistantship, what your teaching assistantship can do for you, and then implicit in that is ask also what you can do for your students, what you can do pedagogically in the classroom. I'm not an expert in teaching. I've taught for a while, and I hope that I'm approaching this from a perspective that can be identified with by other students. So, Dr. Baker-Ward, you can help me out here. I'm not going to teach you anything today. And that is a note. I've written this for TAs, but the points apply to most, particularly early career professors. So, just a single datum here, which I think is interesting. This is the context about which we're speaking. If you're a primary instructor, and even more so if you're teaching in a lab section for like 242, if you're teaching a 243 section, you have approximately 150 minutes a week. So you have a 3A class, 50 minutes a day, 150 minutes a week by about 14 weeks, which gives you 35 hours of contact time with each student. What does that really mean? Well, in context, that's the amount of flight time that is required to get a private pilot's license. So if you spent the amount of time that you spend in an undergraduate class in an airplane, they'd let you fly it on your own. Will you have that transformational of an impact on your students? When a student comes into your classroom, do you have the expectation that you're going to take somebody who's never touched the control systems of an airplane, metaphorically speaking, and turn that person into a competent pilot? I'm not. But boy, if I could. Here are some of the problems that we face, I think, as TAs. If you don't face these, great. And I'll talk about some of the places where we do or don't face them. But first, teaching is a low priority obligation. Teaching is not our primary role. Even if you are a primary instructor, teaching is not your primary role. And I think this is stated explicitly by the administration of the program, by your principal faculty members. Teaching is not your main job. If you're a student first, if you're an early faculty member, this is a different kind of problem because you're probably a researcher first, and then your additional remaining time is spent divided between service to the university and teaching. So it's not the highest priority that you have. And the problem with priorities, as we've learned periodically in our careers, is that sometimes you have to let things go. And so thinking from that, if you're very passionate, as I tend to be often, about developing excellent instruction, reinventing the wheel, really making sure that I deliver the highest quality instructional content that I can to my students, that's fantastic. But do it on your own time. Because it is a luxury. It's not an expectation, and it's probably not a right. It's a privilege. So if something has to take the fall, if one of those priorities shuffles loose, the problem here isn't that your career suffers. It isn't that you're not going to get another entry on your CV. You don't have a presentation. You can't get that money from whatever funding body so that you can go to that conference this year in St. Pete's Beach. 20 to 200 students who are spending 35 hours of their class time, and who knows how many hours outside of the classroom, can suffer if you deprioritize teaching. And perhaps deprioritize teaching you must. This is not an ideal situation. Sorry, it's not all going to be doom and gloom. We'll come up with solutions for this later. Okay, that's problem number one. Problem number two, we're not experts in the areas we're teaching. Sometimes we're novices in the things that we're assigned to teach. Thanks very much to our DGP for making that very seldom the case, but to wit. If you're teaching in your area of expertise, that's fantastic. Faculty sometimes have this luxury because they say, come in and you'll teach introductory and you'll teach research methods, depending on your field, and you'll also teach some area and you'll develop a course in your area of expertise. That's great. That class you're an expert in, or you should be. We may not be. And even then, I'm not pursuing a degree in Introduction to Psychology. That's not my degree. I am a generalist. Say that or my advisor will hit me with things. So I very much respect psychology, and I'm happy that I'm able to teach competently introductory psychology, if I am. And I'm certainly not also pursuing a degree in survey of industrial organizational psychology, but I've taught both of those courses. That's not my specialty. My specialty is a very small subset of that. Yours is very likely a very small subset of whatever your field is. You probably don't know as much about other parts within even your subspecialization as other people do within your program. And that's a problem. That can be disadvantageous for your students. Now, great, that's your area of expertise. Psychology in general, or industrial organizational psychology for me, developmental or whatever it may be. But what if it's a topic in which you're not specializing? I'm teaching personality, or I'm teaching learning and motivation, or I'm teaching research methodology, which I should be specializing in. Or you've never taken it at the graduate level. The psychology department head talks about this a lot. He's really pushing for getting students to take the courses that they're going to teach at the graduate level. Take learning and motivation as a graduate student so you get greater insight to teach it yourself. What if you've never taken it at all? I don't know anyone who's been in this situation, but it could have been years since at the undergraduate level you took a course in cognition or personality. Go teach it now. What? Do you have time, should you, and do you have time to go from novice, be it not your area of specialty or not your area in which you've been trained at the graduate level or an area you've never experienced before, to go from novice to expert? And no, we're not going to operationalize expert well here, but competent enough to teach it. Do you have time to do that? And if you don't, we were just talking about Dr. Gillen, and if you don't, then that's what I thought. So that question, do you have time, is not just rhetorical. I'm going to try to provide some data here. Over 10 semesters of teaching, I know I'm pretty big deal. Or I've been here for too long, then should I be leaving? I've had an average of 73 days to prepare for a course. 73 days is a long time until you actually have it to prepare for a course, as many of us can attest. Standard deviation of that is 34 days, the minimum amount of time that I had to turn around from, yeah, you'll get a teaching assignment, to, guess what, first day of class was 16 days. Now fortunately that was a lab section and I had a great deal of support from my primary instructor, so maybe that's not a good datum, but 16 days is not a long time to go from, oh, I'm teaching a course, to, hello students.
Bob,
do you have time?
You have a story like that.
Yes, I do.
Did you have a quick turnaround one?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right, you showed up. Can I tell the story for you?
Sure.
Dr. Pond showed up the first day of his graduate training and had been offered a teaching assistantship, but wasn't really aware what the assignment would be. So he walked in
I
and...
never got the letter.
Oh, you didn't know you had an assistantship, I'm sorry. And so some member of the staff, I believe, handed you a book and said, here's the book, there's the classroom, you want it? How?
Yeah, this was Friday, and then Monday I was teaching intro psych.
3 days.
Guess what I did that weekend?
Did Dr. Pond even, back then, did he come to expertise in 3 days? No, fortunately, Dr. Pond knows his intro material like the back of his hand now, but and whence? Whence means where from. Whence expertise? Where do you really get expertise? And many of us would say, oh, I read the book. I know everything there is to know about the course. Well, you may know everything you're going to teach in the course, but you don't know the periphery. When a student throws a curveball at you, literally, duck. But when a student throws a conceptual curveball at you, they have the textbook too. And if your expertise doesn't extend beyond the textbook, that's going to become readily apparent. I don't know if that's bad. I try not to put myself in that position. I try to read a lot of textbooks, but again, you are not a teacher first. You are a student. This may not be the best use of your time. Learning the minutiae that surrounds every single theory you're teaching may not be the best expenditure of time. So what do you do? We bummed yet? Keep bumming. Finally, we're inexperienced educators, period. I am the first to be disdainful of experience and disdainful of age. You may join me in that if you'd like. But we are...
Wait a minute.
Whoa, hey.
Come over here. There are great faculty. There are terrible, and I don't mean terrible like Ivan terrible. I mean terrible as in ineffective faculty. But regardless, so these could be overlapping distributions, graduate TAs and faculty and capability of teaching. There could be overlapping distributions. We don't have the experience, period. And that is important. It is a problem that we don't have that experience. We shouldn't be expected to have that experience, but we don't have it. And I think in the minuscule amount of training that I've had, actually it's been a lot of hours, but in the tiny chip of training that I've had formally in pedagogy and teaching and classroom management, I realize more and more every time I go to one of those that I don't even know what I don't know. Go in and they say, hey, you know, what do you do with academic honesty, integrity violation? I go, well, you throw them out of the classroom. And they go, maybe that's not a good idea. What if you're wrong? Oh, I don't even know what I don't know about it. But if I had experience, if I had taught for a dozen years or more, then I would. We don't, and we can't. What do we do about that? And then there's even this personality sort of thing, or this skill-based sort of thing. You may be comfortable speaking in front of other people. Great, fantastic. That's definitely going to give you a leg up in the classroom. And if not, it's something you can develop. But for everyone, experience is going to improve our teaching capabilities until you get to that asymptotic, you should retire point. Okay, that's the doom and gloom. Yeah, it's not an asymptote, sorry, what is it, a point of inflection? Inflection. See, I don't even know what I don't know. Here are some solutions to these problems, so they're matched up with the same problem. Again, it's a low priority obligation for us. What do we do about this? And I think, again, I'd like to solicit your input on these things, but I think this is where the real meat and potatoes of the point is. Time expenditure is something that we need to optimize in this and in all things, but particularly when we're talking about teaching, because you could sink ages into trying to improve your teaching. Should you? And how can you get the most bang for your buck? I love essay exams. I love them. I feel positively about essay exams. I think that they give students an excellent educational experience. They give an opportunity to be more open-ended and show me what you really know instead of could you identify, we have recall and recognition and the ability to identify good writing. Great. Should you do them if you don't have time to grade them? You have a 200-person class. Should you write essay exams for them? Or should you spend the extra time creating a multiple choice exam up front?
If you have a TA, you can have that.
And can you delegate well? I couldn't. I had a TA and I could not delegate well. I couldn't let go of the autonomy that I had in grading things my way and knowing that it was absolutely right. Trust the person a lot, but not enough to give the person work, evidently. And that's something that could
never give Steven a TA.
Yeah. You've done well since.
Yes.
Worked out for that person though. She had a lot of time on her hand. Creating multiple choice exams is time intensive. Creating good multiple choice exams is difficult and extraordinarily time intensive. Should you take the time in advance to do it? So to wit, there's a deadline coming up on 20 September for a conference. And if you were going to spend 10 hours writing a good multiple choice exam today, or you could spend on 21 September 20 hours grading an essay exam, which one should you do? I don't know. Maybe it's the less convenient one. Maybe it's the one that you prioritize your time and the time in which you can dedicate it. Think about these things is the point. Like I said, reinventing the wheel, coming up with entirely new instruction is great. It feels fantastic. It's great to create, in my experience, something that is my own that I can deliver to my class. I'm confident I know what every slide means. I know what every example that I'm providing means. Whereas if I get slides from somebody else, I go, click. Reinventing the wheel is great. What does that mean? I don't know. But it is a luxury. Can you get the materials from an experienced faculty member, a colleague who's teaching the class, who's developed the materials recently? It may be even up to date and fantastic.
Only there was a Moodle site that had all this material on it.
Can you write a Moodle site that is there a repository for demonstration videos that can be used? I wonder if we'll talk about those later in the presentation. Is there a faculty member who wrote the book for introductory psychology that you could talk to and is amazing? All right, this one's a little contentious. I'm going to stand back from the faculty for this. Can you I don't think it's actually that contentious. Can you offload the work that you would do in the classroom on your students? It's fantastic. So an analogy or an example of this that's probably not that good is if a student asks a question you don't know and you go, huh. Well, I know, but why don't you tell me what you think is the correct answer, and then you stand there and gather your thoughts for a minute. It's a great technique to use, by the way. But can you offload the work on your students in a way that's both fair to them and beneficial? And I would say that beneficial means fair. Peer review of written assignments. You could collect all of their written assignments if you've given them. Daring, well done. Collect their written assignments and evaluate each of them and provide formative feedback for them. Great. Or you could make them do it for each other, because that's probably a skill that they should acquire. We go into a community of practice. We want to be able to review each other's work. Then after that first draft, they turn it into you and your work is cut in half or less. Does that make sense? Half or less? I don't know how to use fractions in conversation.
A quarter is less than half,
Yeah,
for example.
It is cut in a quarter. What happens to the other 3/4? This kind of weird, but get your students to write study guides. The #1 request that I get after, can you tell us what we need to know on the exam, is can you tell us how to study for the exam? So yes, know all the things, and then write them down. Students love study guides, I think, and I would appreciate a study guide as well. It directs the way that the instructor is thinking about the content, even if it's not from the purpose of tell me what I can ignore safely. But they're saying, what's your mental model around this content? How will I need to demonstrate to you that I know it? How will I be able to communicate it back to you? That's what study guides can do, but get your students to do that. All right, you guys write a study guide. It'll help them study for the exam. It'll help them organize the knowledge in a new way, and then you can say, that's great, thanks for your contributions. I'm gonna change these things around because this is the way I think about it, or even change your assessment according to that. Help them demonstrate their knowledge to you. This is offloading work on them though. These are hours that you don't need to spend. They are seconds to say, do it yourself, and give them points for it. If it's pedagogically helpful.
Can I suggest another?
Absolutely.
Class presentations.
Yeah.
They.
What do you mean?
I mean that they actually teach part of the class. I've used it and I did get a complaint that I was making them do my work.
Which
But-
is exactly what I want you to
But,
do.
but,
Yeah.
but my purpose was that I believe I had noticed that I learned stuff best when I taught it to others. And that I believe that that's true for students as well, and that it makes sense for them to take some area that they're interested in and work hard and then have to teach others about it.
Good. Yeah, and you're gonna get
And-
pushback
and
on
then-
these.
And then you get like a full day where you're not,
Sit in the back of the
don't
classroom.
have to prepare.
And whether that's dastardly, I don't know, but if you can use it strategically, that's a good idea. So let's say that you have some questionable practice. You really are making them teach it and study yourself. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but let's say there's a day where you know you're gonna be, studying for preliminary exams, or you're gonna be taking your preliminary exams, and you just know you will not be there for the class. Don't do them the disservice of going in there and teaching half-heartedly. Make them teach. Find that day in your schedule and say, all right, this is the day that I'm not too happy with this exercise. Again, I'm sorry that I'm piggybacking off of what you just said. That's not a bad exercise. But when you know that they need to go on a field trip, or they need to work together on a project that they're doing in class, great. Do it on that day. Optimize your time expenditure. Other examples, like Doug's.
Sometimes if a question is asked that I don't know the answer to, happens a lot in intro, then I usually have a little bit of an answer, and especially in intro psych, what they really need is help to get pointed to a decent resource. So you answer the best you can, and then actually do a little research for them, and then say, go look at this particular site, and if they're really interested,
They'll do the rest of it. Yeah, go halfway
and
there.
so you're guiding you're guiding and hopefully developing their ability to kind of teach themselves.
Good.
I have one more.
Fire.
Team-based exercises, or even team-based learning in general, where you would have to prepare the team activity, which takes some time up front, and then you have to grade whatever the product is.
Or make your TA do it.
Yeah, make your TA. But then that class period is taken over by the team-based activity, and they often learn a lot from that, and it's a nice break in, if you have a series of lectures and they're getting tired of listening to you and you're getting tired of talking at them, it's a nice break.
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, we'll talk near the end, there are a lot of ways to think about the particular activities to use, like you guys have been recommending, these kind of meta-level things, but the particular manifestations of them, and how to break up your lecture into more interactive tasks and what time. Those are available as well. But yeah, think about each of these things and use them. What kind of expertise is useful? It's the question that is contained in this. What kind of expertise? I mean, again, do you want to learn everything? As even Bob said, you don't need to know everything about everything in intro. It's impractical to learn all that, and it's not a good use of your time. Can you focus on the things that really matter? And personally, I think that we're very fortunate to be able to decide what matters. There's guidance from the department. You can certainly sit down and talk to any of these people to determine what they think really matters in teaching, but you get to decide a lot of that. You get to throw a chapter out of your course or include another one. So we're not really working on defining what really matters, but what do you want your students to know or to be able to do when they leave? When they're done with your course, do you want them to be able to fly that plane? It's a fairly clear criterion there. Fly without crashing into you, because that's irritating. And do you know those things yourself? So if I want my students who are kind of statistics, my students to master a statistical technique, by goodness, I better have mastered that going into it, because otherwise I'm going to have a problem teaching them it. That's not a good place to say, oh, teach yourselves this. If I want my students to know a broad theoretical model, I better know that in and out. But maybe I don't need to know all of the empirical evidence that was used to demonstrate one of the linkages in that empirical model, or that theoretical model. They can figure it out. Maybe I don't need to know the background, the evolution of that statistical technique. They can figure that out if they're interested. I need to know the takeaways and know them well. So focus your attention there. Here's problem number 2. We aren't experts. Here's your class, go teach it, have fun. Well, what are you? What are you that particularly your undergraduate students aren't? What can you do that they can't? And here, I've been a particularly long-standing undergraduate student and kind of still treat myself like that with this youthful vigor as I approach new topics, but I'm not meaning to patronize undergraduate students. Everyone can think critically. We may be able to do it better. We are a subset of the population in which we were embedded when we were undergraduates, and we're probably those that enjoy thinking critically, or like training to be researchers or something. Leverage that. Demonstrate how they're failing to think critically, or you could think critically in this situation. Ask the important questions. I'm not going to give you examples because it's contingent upon your area of instruction. You can make connections. You can say, yeah, I just taught you about cognitive dissonance theory, and yeah, I just taught you about psychological, social psychological, or cognitive psychological theories. I just talked to you about self-perception theory. Anyone notice anything interesting? And you'll get this almost every time. Both have letters in them. Yes, well done. But it looks like they're two sides of the same coin, and so on. You can make these connections and help illustrate the way that all of these topics weave together. Because sometimes it just seems like a flip show, right? You go, click, here's our first slide, Yosemite National Park. Good. Click, here's our second slide, a shark. Third. What do these have to do with each other? You can demonstrate that. You can see the bigger picture things. And if you have a good textbook, it tells them as well, but provide them another narrative that weaves these things together. Give them a different way of thinking about them. Third, you can filter information. Thanks to Kyle Morgan for bringing this up today. There are a bunch of things out there. There are a bunch of teaching aids that we'll talk about in a moment. What are the ones that are really illustrative? What are the ones that are really engaging? What things add and detract from knowledge about a specific topic? If the person says, oh yeah, I saw that on Desperate Housewives, you say, that wasn't a good example of classical conditioning. I saw that on The Office. That was good, but they got this wrong. You're filtering the information down to distill the points that you're actually trying to communicate. You can do that. So can they, of course, but you have more experience with this. And this may be the most crucial, particularly within psychology, because psychology is an obvious field. It's intuitive. We know everything in psychology. Why do we even have to study it? Well, you can head off the misconceptions and the mistakes. You can head off the simultaneously held contradictory beliefs that people have. You can head off the thoughts that are popular, like Freud, but wrong, and say, good, yeah, we teach this from a historical perspective. There's no empirical evidence for it. People love to think that Maslow's hierarchy of needs is empirically supported, and it's not really. People love to think that, that catharsis works, and it's not really successful. Head those off. And try to short-circuit these discussions before they go off. You're letting your students present and teach and say, no, that's not really accurate. Read more deeply in that. How do you optimize time expenditure in the classroom? Is reading your textbook to your students a good idea?
Philosophy professors do it a lot.
Maybe, I think. And I'm sorry, I try not to weave my opinion in this too much. So, I'd say that I recently read Hamlet. And I got about a 19th out of it that I would if I had sat down with a English prof and we had read Hamlet together, or she or he had read Hamlet to me and said, what'd you think of that part? And I go, yeah, it was nice. There were a bunch of S's in it. I go, did you see how it was a narrative on the social situation at the time? No, I didn't see that. So maybe something like reading the textbook is important to people, because you can, I don't mean literally putting it on the lectern and reading the textbook, but having slides that are essentially just reiterations of what's in the textbook, that can be beneficial. It's super convenient to do. What I'm saying is it's not automatically a bad idea to do something like reading the textbook, but you have to be deliberate about it. Is it going to be something that's obtuse and they don't know how to pull the information out of it? Undergraduate students aren't reasonably expected to do that. Pick a different textbook, but that can be helpful. How can you make your students enthusiastic about the material? This can be, now we're in value added. These are the things where you being in the classroom is better than them having a textbook and a final exam. Try to think like that, if you would. How do you make students enthusiastic? How do you force them or encourage them or what? To care about the content. I think caring helpful in the classroom. I think being enthusiastic about the content will get them there, get them to pay attention to it, and hopefully help them learn in the right direction. If you have ideas for these, not rhetorical questions, let me know, throw them out. Yeah?
For the last one, it seems to me that has to do with the way that you frame the class. So I teach social psychology. I know that Dr. McCoss teaches it from the standpoint of interpersonal relationships. I know in my undergrad they taught it from the standpoint of, in the context of behavior in the internet and stuff like that. And so they discuss all of these concepts through that, and that allows people to sort of engage with the material in a way that's relevant to them in their lives. Everybody has relationships. Everybody uses the internet and stuff like that. So
Social psychology is almost cheating when it comes to enthusiasm.
but you can do that. I mean, like the examples you use, and I think you can frame a lot of classes in ways that sort of help people. Maybe social psychology is cheating.
No, but it is a great example because it's such a minefield for things that are engaging for students. And I think psychology in general is mostly cheating, unless it's like statistics.
Right.
You really have to convince people that they should think about these things because they like thinking what they think. Now, we walk a fine line, I think, here. So, I don't know where you come down on this. I haven't seen you teach, but are we there to dance and sing for them? That would be enthusiastic on our part, and it would perhaps inculcate enthusiasm in them. Yay, we're going to the class where we get to watch blockbuster movies every day. But is it attached to pedagogy? Are you getting them enthusiastic for coming to class because you give them candy every time? Or are you getting them enthusiastic to come to class because they'll learn about whatever appropriate topic in psychology? Maybe you have to make compromises there. Sometime you have, a popcorn movie day. Make it a psychology movie. Make it popcorn of science. Don't know what that means. This kind of goes back to what kind of expertise do you have? Are you trying to cover everything? And then there was this citation in this year, and they found this. Let's look at the correlation matrix that they pulled up in that thing. Good. Let's look at the off diagonal. Or are you saying, here's the distillation. Got it, moving on. Because the book has all that information, or if you make them read an article, it has all that information. But in the classroom, you don't need to read the entire article. You don't need to read the textbook. Can you just pull out the parts that are most important? That's another thing you can do that maybe they can't yet. They don't understand what's most important about it. Value added by you. And I know I'm not using value added in the economics term, but social sciences, whatever. Again, there are resources for these examples. And they can be videos, or they can just be demonstrations of some concept, or they can be, hey, let's tie this back to the internet, or let's tie this back to interpersonal relationships. But can you generate examples that click with your students? This, your textbook may not be able to do, because the people who write them tend to be old. Your students tend to be young.
This ageism is just,
That's actually the third subtitle for the thing. It was
okay.
value add or ageism.
I missed that.
And there are to demonstrate.
No, it's true. I used to be able to talk about Seinfeld episodes, and everybody understood, and that, it's the youth culture has gotten beyond me. Partly because there's not really a unified youth culture anymore, as far as I can.
The fact that you know there isn't a unified youth culture, though, puts you ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
There are people who
I can refer to "Call Me Maybe," and that everybody knows that, but there are very few things that everybody knows.
Yeah.
Anymore.
You gotta teach them.
Or flashbulb memories.
Remember 9/11? Oh, you were 6. Never mind.
Yeah, right. And Kennedy, they were, that's ancient history. And,
Yes.
so the things you think you have to keep changing your examples because the lifespan of an example is like about
Thank you.
years.
Thank you, old people, for making my point. But this is a double-edged sword because being chummy, I don't have this experience, but you'll see that I'm walking around without flip-flops on and a t-shirt. So maybe I do have this problem, I just don't know it. But there's this notion of the instructor as the sacred external individual. The instructor is this very respectable, dignified, suit-laden individual who comes up in front of the course and scares the bejesus out of them. And okay, if you're young, maybe that undermines your ability to be that respectable person. And so if you can, if you can click and sit down and go, hey, did you see that episode of television show yesterday? Then that may not be so good for you. So maybe watch that. But if you can weave in relevant examples to tie things to things that they know. So it's not, hey, remember that time that JFK spoke to people? JF whom? Good. Walk the line carefully. Boom. This is a little bombastic, sorry. Can you set up the stick and the carrot as necessary in a classroom? Can you set up contingencies? So it's the same sort of thing as saying you're trying to lose weight, forgive the metaphor, you're trying to lose weight, and your partner or a friend of yours says, all right, great, we're gonna go running together, or every time that you report a decrease in weight or something, we'll go shopping, or these are contingencies that we're setting up to say engage in a behavior that I like, and you'll get something that you like. Bracket, using the term like is probably ill-advised in an operant conditioning framework. Bracket. Can you set up contingencies that will motivate students? Not even getting into what motivation means, but something you can do that's better than them just having the textbook is that you can hold them accountable for learning the information. If you've ever walked around on the 7th floor and you saw the big stand of free textbooks that are free books that people put up and you go, oh my goodness, I want to learn Latin, and you take it, you've never learned Latin from that book. You learned more from your high school Spanish class though, or your high school Latin class or whatever, because somebody held you to it. You can do that. So establish contingencies that are mutually advantageous. They help them out by getting grades or praise or whatever, and they help them out again by giving them useful knowledge. And you're not a sod then. 6. This is a more philosophical question, but it's one I encourage you to think about. If you go into it just saying, I have never seen this course information before, I'm going to do terribly, I'm going to teach, 20th century European history, I know nothing about it. There was a Europe in the 20th century, I wasn't there. Then you may miss the fact that what you're there for could be teaching them that declarative knowledge, but it can also be teaching them the critical thinking we were talking about, teaching them the ability to think cross-curricularly, teaching them the ability to integrate media into their life, and on and on and on. Look at the university's mission statement, or talk to a department head or something. This is an opportunity to grow. If you're making them do teamwork, it's an opportunity to grow as a person who interacts with other people, who works together in teams. It's probably relevant to the job environment when we are adults. If you're teaching them to give presentations, you're teaching them the ability to speak in public. Great. If they're uncomfortable with it, they will complain. So don't force them to do things that are unnecessarily psychologically harmful. We're just looking for like a moderate level of psychological harm. Okay, we're on to our 3rd problem. This one's kind of obvious. We are inexperienced educators. A penny to the first person who can tell me what you do about inexperience.
Inexperience?
Well done. Practice doesn't necessarily make perfect for us, but it makes it better. I don't think anyone's ever going to get perfect in teaching, but it will improve you. So get practice. I encourage you to teach as much, but only as much as is practical, which is completely banal. That means nothing. Think about it though. Teach as much as you can without going overboard. So that may mean guest lecture. If there's a course where you are an expert and your colleague, particularly your peers, guest lecturer, your peers, are not experts, ask them if you can teach for them. Because that's great. I mean, it offloads the work from that person for the most part, unless they have to write new assessment because you taught it bizarrely, or you scared all their students off or something. Or you were so good that they don't want to come to the first person's class anymore. I've never had that problem. And then you get experience. This is great. You get to walk in front of a group of people you've never met before and teach them. The stakes are very low for you. Teach well, prepare a lot, but if they thought you were a sod, okay, it's one day. However, if it's crunch time, if you have a thesis to write, if you're working on your dissertation, if you're studying for preliminary exams, career advancement doesn't always mean getting experience in your career. Sometimes it means knowing when to fold them on that. So you may have to turn down that really awesome, lucrative, by the way, there are no lucrative adjunct positions, But that exciting adjunct position that may be a foot in the door for a job a couple years down the line, get your PhD first. That summer section of a course that you always wanted to teach, guess what? You're too busy. Let it go. This is teaching as much as is practical. I make that mistake all the time. I'm a horrible person for that. I've taught way too much. Sorry. And if you TA just to pay the bills, this is a recommendation entirely from me. Please make this clear to your handlers. One of our handlers, my handler, Lynn Baker Ward, just left the room a while back. But this is going to be better for all people, I think. Don't go, yeah, I'm really enthusiastic about teaching new things. Give me new courses. I hate teaching. It may be great for people who are aspiring to be academicians, who want to go into the professoriate for their career. Great.
No, they spend all their time trying to get out of teaching too, so.
True. All right, so those who are really teaching, and this is good advice. Remember back early, I'm not sure if Dr. Gellin was here at that point, back early we said teaching isn't a high priority. That's going to be true when you go to your career in a university as well. It's not rewarded very much. It's a luxury. It feels great. It's so much fun.
Depending on the university.
It feels great or it doesn't feel great or it's a
Priority.
Yes.
Some
correct.
universities do prioritize teaching.
True. Many pay lip service to prioritizing teaching, and some probably do actually care. Yeah, good point. So it could be great to prep new classes. And what I mean by prep new classes is, you know, oh, you've never taught intro before, but you've taught these other ones here, go teach intro. And then you have to prep the entire thing and you have that in your tool belt. Then when you go to a different university or a different semester, you go, pah, got you, intro, I can teach that. That takes a lot of time. Teaching cognitive 400 times in a row is much easier than teaching 2 different versions of undergraduate classes. So that can be great. But if you're not going to go into the professoriate, if you're not going to be an academician, it is a waste of your time. Probably. You can make it work for you. But don't do undergraduates the disservice of half-hearted teaching, please. You were an undergraduate recently, or once. You don't want to be done badly by that. If you're in a huge classroom and the person wastes your time every day, demands that you're there, this is bad. This is a lot of people's time wasted, a lot of contact hours. Think 35 hours per person in your classroom. Don't do it badly. Oh, check this out. By all around you, I mean like, sitedomain.com, I don't know what that is.
You don't know what it is?
I wish someone here could tell us what site domain was.
Yeah, I wish somebody could, David.
Site Domain is a website that we put together a couple years ago to be sort of a repository for videos and images and sort of content for teaching. And probably could do with some updating, but yeah, I encourage you to go visit it.
Are they free to access or are they?
Yeah, it's department owned. So it's really just a repository. So if you have cool videos or content that you think has been helpful in teaching or you've seen somebody use that was helpful, let me know. I can add
And it links to other repositories as well.
Yes.
So it's not, the
Just
information isn't necessarily there, but you'll link to someplace else that does have it.
Good. Yeah, it is quite useful, and it's broken down by content area, if I recall correctly. The 3 abbreviations, COAT, FIT, and PTP, are formal programs on campus that are provided to help people learn to teach better. And so I've not covered the specifics in a lot of ways, but examples that people were providing, you can get in much greater detail. If you want to talk about classroom management, if you want to talk about writing assessments, if you want to talk about writing rubrics, there are classes available. You can get certifications. Certificate of Accomplishment in Teaching is for what COAT stands. FIT is Fundamentals in Teaching. These are just simple seminars to which you can go. They're great. They're offered through the Office of Faculty Development. I know we're not faculty, you can still go. Preparing the Professoriate is an application-only program from which I've been rejected repeatedly. And it's more formal, it includes more time, but it's a...
If you wore shoes, maybe they'd expect.
I'll tell you, I'm not willing to work with people who
Okay.
discriminate on the basis of shoes. This brown bag is a fantastic...
They're all old anyway.
reason they are.
Yeah.
You can't chase me down. Shouldn't position myself with the old people between me and the door when I say those things.
I think you can.
Go around and over, that's right.
Yeah.
Anyway, this brown bag, the series in which we're engaged right now, is an excellent opportunity for that, and I'm not just plugging it because I'm awesome, but the people I know to be coming up are more capable of talking about these things than I am. So I encourage you to continue attending, but also provide your own material and content. And then the TA Moodle is something that is available through the department. I think it's open to anyone. When we're here, she can tell us. And it just offers resources for first-time and continuing faculty. It's a place for people to post things, though no one ever has. And you can also get information about what kind of textbooks to use, what happens in given situations should you pursue an academic integrity violation, just practical advice for teachers. So if you're in that 70-day period or so before your course is taught, it's a great place to go to get a lot of content. And it can point you in the direction of other folks who will have it.
Yeah, I just want to say if anybody has questions about code, I actually did the program and completed it last year. So let me know. I'll be happy to talk to anybody about it if you want to know more information. But it's really useful and really good.
And I see your teaching portfolio.
Hmm?
Do you carry your teaching portfolio with you?
It's electronic, but you can see it.
Finally, given all of this naysaying that I've made, these three problems and their far-reaching implications, humility is helpful, I think. To say to a student, to not demonstrate humility, to say to a student, no, don't look it up because I'm right. Or, yeah, I know all the answers to all the questions, try me. Or, you know, you're not. You don't know the answers to all the questions. And I think they'll respect you more if you are honest about that. But doubting yourself probably isn't. So being, I don't know how to turn that into a adverb, living humilitously.
Humbly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the same root, does it? Yeah, so being,
It is.
being humble. And I'm wrong.
Should have read that Latin book.
See, I'm humble because I'm wrong. Being humble, good, great. But don't go in there and say, hi folks, this is my first day of teaching ever. I'm really incompetent at this. They've unleashed me on this course with ill preparation. Don't really know this content. I got the textbook yesterday. Even if all of these things are true, shut your mouth. That's not going to be beneficial, in my opinion. Not a big liar to people, unless I'm lying right now. But communicating this level of apparent incompetence to your students isn't going to be helpful. They should know how much you can help them, but if you go into the classroom and just entirely undermine yourself, then you've been successful at undermining yourself, and you're right, you are incompetent.
It's like when I always tell students, grad students, when they give a talk, which they will often preface a talk by saying, well, I'm not really sure about this, and it's just an idea, but is like, I'm not now excited to spend the next 30 to 40 minutes listening to you talk about this.
Good.
You want people to, you want to give people a reason to listen to you. And they're going to be listening to you for 48 hours, approximately.
I can't
If
believe
you're
the figures, but
if you're lecturing mostly. So they're making a huge commitment of time to you, and you need to at least fool them into thinking that you're
that's the funky
competent.
part. It is a deception. If you are all of those levels of incompetence and you don't have time to rectify that, it's unfortunate. But you're not going to do anyone a favor by saying, don't listen to me, I'm bollocks. Say, you know, take what I say with an appropriate amount of skepticism and look it up and check my references and correct me if I'm wrong. That's a big one. But don't cut yourself off at the knees. That's all I've got. What do you have?